And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alexandra from the Centre for Digital Built Britain. Real pleasure to be here in Dublin today. So the UK government has been using policy for many years to drive the digital transformation of the construction and infrastructure sectors. Building information modelling, or BIM as we all know it, has been mandated on public projects since 2016, but this is a journey that started in 2011 and previously. And this mandate has contributed significantly to savings of over 3 billion on the UK government's construction programme since 2011. And following this success, a number of key documents have been pushed out to enhance and support the digital transformation agenda and off-site manufacturing so that we can improve the productivity of the construction sector, looking at whole life value and the improved benefits of citizens. So we're not just looking at APEX, we're looking at the whole life. And the government has recognised that there was a need for a national leadership body. There's some fantastic work that's been going on throughout the UK and internationally. But in 2017, the Centre for Digital Built Britain was placed in Cambridge, moving on for some work that people that I'm sure you have known and worked with have done over the last decade to create that movement. And the UK Task Group has been set up to support these further developments and new techniques to support the UK construction sector more widely. The scale of the challenge is really quite enormous. The poor productivity performance of the construction sector, it's in part explained by the relatively low levels of investment in R&D. Construction spends about 0.9% of its budget on R&D. If you compare that, and that's about £211 million. In contrast, if you look at the amount the automotive sector invests over the same period, it's 3.3 billion, and aerospace is 1.9 billion, so it's a massive difference. In reinventing construction, McKinsey estimated that if the construction sector could embrace the change towards digital technologies, that productivity gains of between 50 and 60% are easily achievable. I know some of you will have seen this already today. Again, this is the McKinsey report looking at how digitise our various industries. And as you can see, construction is second from the bottom, only just above agriculture and hunting. And we as an industry, we need to do something about that if we are going to realise the benefits of digital. The Centre for Digital Built Britain has been located in the University of Cambridge, but it's not just a university research hub. We're not sitting there in our ivory towers just doing research. It would be a disaster if that's what we were there to do. So we have three main streams. We have this building academic capacity, not just in Cambridge, throughout the UK and internationally. That's the sort of thing you would expect. It's research projects, it's collaboration, it's talking to industry about their research needs. But we also have informing policy, because we know that research can be done, work can be done, but unless we can change the policy, the regulations, the certifications that underpin the work that needs to be done in business, it's not going to work. So we will work to inform policy, but we will also work to support industry change, to help industries, whether they're the really big clients who are setting out the projects, or whether they're very small SMEs of a handful of people, maybe only one or two. We need to support them to make the changes so that they can use these digital technologies for their benefit and for the benefit of the country. So by building research capacity, as I say, it's centred in Cambridge, but we are working with quite a large number of other academic institutions, both in the UK and worldwide. It's a multidisciplinary research community. It's not just about the tech. If we only look at the tech, we will have missed a huge opportunity. We need to be looking at how we change our procurement, how we change our contracts, how we change our regulations, how the citizen relates to the built environment. The research is meant to provide the long-term research capacity and a long-term research agenda so that we can realise the ambitions of the Digital Built Britain and of the Digital Built Britain and BIM programmes within government. To date, we have sponsored, we've got 34 out there. Yesterday, actually, that we did another 6, so 40 cross-disciplinary research projects and networks at a number of institutions within the UK. And we have very close links with industry, with regulatory bodies, with policyholders, so that it's the research that's done can become part of professional practice, not just something that sits in the paper in a library and nobody ever reads. Informing policy, as I mentioned, is really important. So our research outputs are designed not to be just for academic audiences. In fact, the majority aren't. They're designed to be an evidence base to inform policy and to inform industry. We have set up a Home Nations working group, so all 4 of the Home Nations are represented. It's chaired by Dave Philps, I'm sure a lot of you will know, and it's about making sure that nationally we're all talking the same language, we're using the same standards, we're going in the same direction. So the tugs are aligned, going in a straight line, rather than even a slight change means that we will end up in different places and we won't be interoperable, we won't be able to work together so well. The public sector BIM working group continues to do fantastic work within government, working with government departments to allow them to understand what digital technologies in construction can do for them, what the savings can be, how they can use them, how they can use them in the procurement process, how they can specify them correctly. More recently, we've set up the Digital Framework Task Group, which is a group of about 30 people from government, from industry, from regulators, looking at what are the very top level principles we need to make sure that our digital information, our data, is shareable yet secure, is trustworthy. What do we need from our data when we want to share it in the construction and infrastructure world? And that's chaired by Mark Enzer from Mott MacDonald. Within the next month, there will be a publication called the Gemini Principles from the DFTG, which is looking at digital twins. What are the principles that we need for a digital twin? What is the definition of a digital twin? So I would urge you, keep looking at the website, that will come out very soon, and it looks to be a very good read. And then we have international programs. We have 2. We have our core international program and a prosperity program. They're working to go to any country that will have us, actually, to discuss how are we using BIM, how are we using digital technologies in construction and infrastructure. Can we use that to export UK skills? But it's not just about us going there saying, hey, this is what we're doing. It's about us listening. What are you doing? How does that work for you? How does that sit in your market? What can we learn from the way you're doing business? Because there are some fantastic examples of really good practice out there that we need to be listening to and we need to be capturing for the UK. And then we need to support change. It's all very well to have policy changing, it's all very well to have great bits of research, but if the industry itself can't pick it up and run with it, it's absolutely useless. So we need to help industry to make the changes that it wants to make. We need to be listening to industry. What are their wants? What are their needs? What are the difficulties? So we can feed that back into the research and policy program. We need to build a big evidence base to change so that the BIM evangelists, the digital evangelists, can go to their boards and say, look, this is why you should be doing this. It works, here's the proof. And we need to highlight places where people have done really fantastic bits of work. So highlighting that good practice again, so it can go to the board, so it can be a persuasive argument for change. And we need to get people together with industry to share their experiences, their value cases, what's worked for them, how has it worked, what would they do better next time. So what is a digital build Britain? You've heard me use the phrase a number of times. It's in the Digital Build Britain, we harness the wealth of data that we're collecting in digital construction through BIM, through sensors, through people walking through offices in their smartphones. We need to look at high-performing assets, smart cities, the digital economy, digital contracts, and connected citizens so that we can deliver a Britain that's fit for the future. It's about looking at the data we've got now and saying, how can we use that to make a better outcome for our children? And this will be achieved in this context by looking at the way we design, build, operate, and integrate our physical, social, and economic infrastructure. So in the design phase, we started out with CAD back in the 80s, I think I first started using CAD, and we've moved up to some very sophisticated tools now, but the premise is the same. We need to get the data right at the start. We need to start using good practice, looking at other people's good practice, seeing how we could use that, and we need to make sure that that data is secure by design right at the beginning of the process. It will involve looking at how advances in machine learning and AI can improve the design of our homes, of our offices, and of our infrastructure. Building the asset, that's the bit that most of us see, most of us have been working in. So we are looking at how do we exploit new and emerging technologies in digital construction and manufacturing. Because manufacturing techniques such as robotics, off-site, kit of parts, they've been used in other industries, particularly oil and gas, aero and auto industries, to really good effect. How can we use these in construction? What can we learn from them? And the flip side, talking with some of them, they want to know what they can learn from us too, because we're going on this journey now. They did it 20 odd years ago. We need to make sure that we've got secure, shared information, so that enables the clients, it enables the design teams, the construction teams, and the whole supply chain to work much more closely together so that we can improve safety, the quality, and the productivity during the construction phase. And quite often there's a big gap between the design phase, the build phase, and then the operate phase. So historically there have been cases where you more or less turn up with your big pile of papers, you hand them over with the key and they say, there you go. There's no follow through on that data. It's really important that that data from the very first design stage goes into the operate stage of the asset. So using real-time information, building on the information from the design and build phase, from the abundance of Internet of Things devices that we've got buzzing around our world at the minute, and from sensors which hopefully we have embedded in our buildings, to transform the performance of that asset and the environment in which it sits. We need to move away from looking at design and build as a box and the capex that sits with that, to looking at the whole life value of an asset. So it might be more expensive as you buy it, but by the time you've run it for 20 years, you're making a massive profit compared to where you would be. So we need to use technology to find innovative ways of increasing that productivity, of delivering more capacity within our existing social and economic infrastructure, as well as our new builds. And then you have to integrate your assets into your suite of assets, into your national infrastructure and into the natural environment. So we need to look at how do people use those assets? What data should we get from them? How do they feel about the assets in which they're moving? Feeding that information back through to the design and build stage. So when we're building another one of these, we build a better one. So in summary, Digital Built Britain should ultimately improve citizen quality of life. That's the goal. On the way, there should be better productivity, there will be better economic outcomes, better social outcomes, perhaps education will improve, perhaps hospitals will have better outcomes for their patients. But it's about the citizen, it's citizen-centric. So we need to understand what information we need right at the start. We need to ensure that the feedback loops are in place, so as we go through the life cycle of asset, we pick up data, we feed it back into the next time we build one of these or we design one of these. We need to make sure that we're looking at the whole life value of an asset and that we're optimizing services so that we get a better socio-economic outcome. And we need to look at exploiting these new and emerging technologies and skills to increase productivity. There are lots of technical drivers that will move us towards a digital build Britain, and a number of them have been spoken about in the last couple of days. BIM, of course, is a fundamental foundation at the bottom, but we need to be looking at contracts, we need to be looking at smart construction, we need to be looking at new and emerging technology. I've mentioned AI and ML, moving towards that smart asset management and operation, and eventually the UK has decided that we should be moving towards a national digital twin. So this would be a federated model of models to create this twin rather than one monolithic thing. But all these things technically will allow us to build a digital built Britain. But it's not just about technology, it is about the citizens. So there are so many other things we need to do to deliver the change. We need to educate from the kids at school through to the person who's nearly retiring and is quite uncomfortable with these digital technologies. We need to make sure that industry, policymakers and academia are all engaged in the journey and feeding in their skills and their knowledge. We need to make sure that we've got an international understanding of what's happening out there and an exporting of our skills and standards. We need to make sure that data governance is strong, that ethically we're looking after it and that it's secure. But most of all, and I think probably most difficult, one is we need this management and organisational change. We need the industry to embrace digital technology and realise that it will make a massive difference to the productivity of construction, to the way and the speed and the outcomes of the construction business. I'd like to share with you briefly, because I know I haven't got a huge amount of time, some case studies from the work that's been done in CDBB in the last 9 months or so, to give the idea of the sort of things that we think will change the construction industry. So Jamie Johnston at Bryden Wood has done some fantastic work on platforms, so bridging the gap between manufacturing and construction. So the potential benefits of adopting this greater standardization and process in construction have been discussed for a long time. The Latham Report in 1994, Michael Latham said, I'm going to read this, there is scope for improvement through greater standardization of components and design details and more off-site prefabrication. And the UK government has now adopted the presumption in favour of off-site for all its new buildings. So it's assumed that that would be the best case in any building that it's thinking of procuring. And this report that you can see on the screen was developed by Bryden Wood and published by CDBB, setting out how this transformation would work. Platforms are the key to it, so we need to be looking at the platform on which you would build your building. And when I first came across this, it was a confusing concept till it was explained to me like this. You have an iPhone, that is your platform. You've got your app, which is Uber, and it's delivering my taxi service to take me to the station this afternoon. It's been done for a long time in the auto business, where you have your chassis as the platform, you have your engine which sits on that platform and delivers a car. Why can't we do this in construction? And the answer is, we can. Pretty much all buildings within construction are related in some sense to the human form, and although we're different shapes and sizes, we're much of a muchness. So it puts in rough ceiling heights, it puts in door heights, it gives you an idea of the space. That allows us to define a very small number of platforms that can define a huge number of buildings, of different types of buildings with different needs. Anything from a bedroom to a massive sports hall. And within those platforms, the connections and interfaces can be standardized so that just a very few designs meet a huge range of needs. And many of these components are just repeatable. A plug socket is a plug socket. It doesn't matter whether it's in a sports hall or my bedroom at home. And the Ministry of Justice in the UK has used this to look at its estate. And it's said that it can construct virtually everything it needs just from 3 platforms. Another study we've looked at is how do you design complex environments for people with neurological damage. So Thomas Stone is looking at a new field, an emerging field called neuroarchitecture. So it looks at the relationship between brain processes and architectural environments and what their impact is on the emotional and physical well-being of the person using that environment. So the built environment itself can disable people by its physical nature. And we need to build buildings that are accessible to all. So whether that means somebody with a motor issue, whether it means a small child, whether it means an older person, we need to design our buildings to meet those needs of somebody with that complex set of conditions. And the project asked the question, is it possible to use virtual reality to support the design of these safer built environments for people with complex sensory impairments? And there hadn't been much work done on using digital techniques in this sort of design building. So Thomas and his team has developed a very low-cost method where they have off-the-shelf sensors, they use a very standard games console and VR to create environments for people with impairments to negotiate. So they've looked at dense city spaces, very sparse rural spaces, and open cityscapes to see how would these people interact with their environment. But they're not in the environment, they're in a very safe lab environment. And certain characteristics of that environment could be changed by the user. So Thomas could see what worked better. So for example, just changing the patterning on the floor made a huge difference to people with physical motor differences. We thought it would affect people with visual problems, but it made a difference to people with much more physical problems as well. The project was testing the feasibility of measuring the user's movement through these environments and was supported by a literature review. looking at the principle of universal design, can you build a building, an asset that everybody can use? Can you use VR to make sure you do that? Thomas's answer is yes, you can. We can design buildings using VR, taking into account these complex sensory issues, and this modern neuro-architectural approach gives an insight into how people can use virtual reality going forward to design buildings for others with different impairments or different needs or different uses. And obviously, if you can do it in VR, it's much cheaper, much quicker, much safer than creating either a full-scale mock-up or creating a building that doesn't work. And the last project I want to talk to you about is actually one of my favourites. So we have looked at the Edge in Amsterdam. I urge any of you, if you get a chance to go to Amsterdam and go to this building called the Edge, do. It is just amazing. It was my first trip in my role as Deputy Director, and it made me get why we do what we do. So it was billed as the most IoT advanced building in the world, and I can see why. As CDBB, we're working to share lessons from tools that are already out there, the Edge in this case, with others to create better things next time. So in this case, a better office building. And Deloitte's wanted this building to be their new headquarters in Amsterdam and to be an exemplary IoT building. They designed it, and it probably is the smartest office building in the world. A day in the Edge starts off with you picking up your smartphone. It knows your schedule. It knows what time you arrive in the office. It recognises your car. It sends you to the parking space. You walk in, it knows you've walked in. At this point, I was starting to feel it was a little bit like Big Brother, but talking to the people in the office, they don't feel like that at all, because they get in and it says, okay, Alexandra, there's a space for you here. Fits perfectly with your meeting. I sit down. It knows what temperature I like it, what sort of lighting I would like. It also tells me when the coffee machine is without a queue, so I can go get a coffee for my 11 o'clock coffee. It is, I have to say, pretty cool. But it's not just about how the users feel about it, it's about the amount of time and money that Deloitte's have saved with this building. So they have an absent rate that's dropped to 45% of what it was before, 2.5 times increase in the number of applicants for each job. The Rotterdam office is seeing people begging to come and work in Amsterdam because they really like the building. And if you know the rivalry between Amsterdam and Rotterdam, that's quite something. And the maintenance costs are down 40% because of this big data lake, because of this sharing of data that they have here. The outcome is that it wasn't just the technology that helped this building be something really special. It's the people and how the people are choosing to use it and how the managers of the building are choosing to interact with the people. So the success of the Edge goes beyond that cutting edge technology into the cultural change that takes place. So as an example, 2,500 people work in the Edge, but there are only 1,000 desks. But it's never a problem. The building is adapted so that people can be flexible, they can work in various spaces, and this flexible working with Deloitte has made it work. It was about communication between the users, the key stakeholders, and the designer of the building to create this building. And I would hope that in the future we, as a group, will be able to make not just our buildings, but our infrastructure and our country work much more like this with the appropriate changes and productivity benefits that we should get. And I can see I have red flashing 0, so I will leave you with that. But if anybody would like to know more about CDBB, please come to the website, please sign up to the mailing list, or please just email me. I'll be really happy to talk.